Hey YouTube, so it is currently 3:30 in the morning and normally I'd be sleeping like a log, but I had a family emergency last night and the immediate emergency is over, but I'm quite traumatized by what happened and was unable to sleep. So I just got up to decompress and I just thought I'm not going to share details of what happened. I'm still trying to process it. I'm going to be very tired tomorrow and not probably sharp. So I had on my mind something, I guess, because of what happened, and it's related to the drug community. So I wanted to talk about how diet is not just what you eat. It's everything you expose your mind to. It's everything you put in your body, on your body. It's everything you surround yourself with. And we have this sort of narrow idea of what diet is. Right away when you hear diet, you think food. You think food restriction. You think calorie counting or carb counting. At least that's what I think about. But really, diet is, in my opinion, everything you expose yourself to. So again, I want to reiterate this because it comes up so often, and I find myself, like, in my coaching, and I find myself thinking about it really often, and that's the online support groups and what the information on those groups really does to people. Because my theory, or my own personal opinion, is that in the acute phase and the subacute phase of drug withdrawal, you are mostly dealing with the chemical effects the drug has had on you and your body trying to undo that. And it's not a quote mind over matter thing. It's not, you're just not thinking the right way. You're just not doing the right things. It's not about that. I use the analogy of, that's like trying to tell a drunk person not to be drunk. A drunk person is under the effects of alcohol and they can't just overcome those effects by willpower or by thinking their way out of it. It's the same thing with this when you're in acute and subacute. So I just have my hand on my chest. It's giving me some comfort. I'm just, it's been a very tough night. And it's more when you get, I think, protracted, that other things come into play, such as, limbic system dysfunction. I mean, that's probably there all along, but I think it becomes this sort of negative looping in your mind, and second fear, like I've talked about in other videos. Your brain is still hijacked in a way when you're in protracted, and so it's more vulnerable, I think, to things that it hears and sees and reads and that. But I also think that walking away, I've seen, people in some of the forums where they're like, you know what, I've been on this forum for so long, I feel like at this point it's just doing me harm and I'm going to leave the community. And then they'll come back, in 2 or 3 years and say, people, get off these forums, you'll do better. And that has been my experience as well. It's really important to at some point stop feeding your brain the fear thoughts, because once, like, even if you're in a windows and waves pattern, you might find that in a window you might be able to tolerate quite a bit, like if you're even reading or seeking information at all. A lot of people will find when they're in a window, they're like, I just don't really think about it as much. I just kind of live my life or go about my day and do normal things. But if you are maybe just bored at home and you're in a window and you're browsing YouTube and your previous history is all about, benzo withdrawal, it's going to keep showing you videos like that. So you might click on one of them and read the comments and they don't really affect you. But you go back into a wave, you're really dysregulated, and you're bombarding yourself with the fear stories, the horror stories. When is this ever going to end? And I think it really feeds your subconscious mind. And it really affects you when you become dysregulated, because your mind might start pulling up all of those horror stories and repeating them in your head, and then it creates a fear response, and then it creates more thoughts, and it's just this horrible loop. So I want to give, okay, so I was reading about tinnitus, and this is a symptom a lot of people experience in withdrawal. I find that it seems to be more common with benzos, but not necessarily. People get it from all different kinds of drugs. And there was a guy that I was reading about, and he had had tinnitus for a very long time. I won't say how long, because I don't want to scare anyone, but I also want to say that his was not from psychiatric drugs. So maybe that would bring comfort if I told you the length of time, but I won't. And it had really taken a toll on his life, mentally and emotionally, and stress wise, and it was affecting all different areas of his life, and he couldn't really get over it. And he was trying, just like the drug community, trying all kinds of supplements and all types of alternative therapies and acupuncture and Chinese medicine and all these things, and nothing was really helping. And so he basically came up with his own method, or cure as he calls it, based on all the information he had. I guess, I don't know if it just popped into his head to try a different variation of things he had read or what, but he's essentially cured his tinnitus after a very long time. So he said the key was to, one of them was to stop scanning for it. And, waking up in the morning, is it still there? Is it not there? Stop comparing it to how it was before. Is it better? Is it worse? Kind of going through that mental note taking. What does it sound like today? How loud is it? Is it louder than it was before? Is it getting better? Oh no, and this constant awareness of it. And again, everything he had read about it, everything he had tried, it was just perpetuating this cycle of tinnitus and more fear about the tinnitus. And so he was like, I'm going to stop tracking it. I'm going to stop looking for it. I'm going to stop. And it wasn't like he could just do it at the snap of a finger. Otherwise he wouldn't have had it for so many years. But he's like, I'm going to change basically my approach to it, and say, instead of looking for it and gauging it and tracking it, I'm going to be like, acknowledge basically that it's there. I hear you. Basically saying, well, he would write it down. I hear you. And then he would describe his reaction to it. I hear you and I feel scared. I hear you and I feel hopeless. I hear you and I feel depressed. And I guess this sort of graceful acknowledgement of it, and it's sort of like Claire Weeks, if you're familiar with her, the accept and float. It was basically a version of that, where it's like you're acknowledging that it's there, you're accepting that it's there, you're labeling your reaction to it, so writing it down, and then eventually, just doing it in your head. And it habituates you to it. And so I read an interesting book about tinnitus, or partial ebook, that talked about how everybody has tinnitus. And if you put people without diagnosed or labeled tinnitus in a soundproof room, they will hear ringing or whatever. They'll hear sounds in their ears, because it's a natural neuronal activity. But when you have, you've been exposed to loud sounds or drugs or whatever, it heightens your awareness of it. And I guess even if the decibel is the same over time, it's your awareness of it that is distressing. And so I don't know, it's something like that. I don't remember all of the details, but basically by doing this, he habituated himself to it. And I think about my own struggles with a quite severe anxiety before I ever took psychiatric drugs, that I had actually gotten over. I had actually relieved myself of it 4 years before I even took meds. So I didn't take meds for anxiety. I took them for job loss, which is so stupid in hindsight. But that was basically what I did. I was having debilitating panic attacks to where I was like literally collapsing on the floor. I was scared of open spaces. I would have a hard time walking in stores because I felt like I was walking at an angle, like I needed to grab onto something because I would get dizzy. I had phobias. I had social anxiety. I was so afraid of what people thought of me. I was afraid of fainting in public. I had all of these fears. And once I really didn't know I had anxiety. I didn't know what it was. I just knew I had struggled all my life with feelings of nervousness, and then it morphed over time and got worse. And then I learned about, it wasn't Claire Weeks' method, but it was Lucinda Bassett's, and it was basically like you arm yourself with the knowledge that anxiety is there, it's present, it's not dangerous, it won't hurt you, it won't kill you. It feels like it will, but it won't. So when you feel the anxious feelings come on, understand what it is. It's, a chemical response often, and I'm not saying this in drug withdrawal, but just in general. It's a response to bodily sensations and the way you're interpreting them. And if you can tell yourself and learn the facts about anxiety, that it's not going to kill you, it's not an immediate danger, it just feels that way, the knowledge alone can calm it down. But then the second phase of that is you acknowledge those feelings, you realize they're not going to hurt you, you allow them to be there, you kind of live alongside them. It's a process, it's a journey. And then, eventually you become completely fine with the sensations when they do come on. You understand them, you float with them, accept them, and then eventually the anxiety goes away, it dissipates. It's very similar to all these other things, one being tinnitus. And again, when I was going through that anxiety recovery journey, I wasn't frantic. This was before the days really of much internet. This was in 2004 that I really started the journey to overcome anxiety. I had another flare up in 2007, but it was mild, and I used my techniques and got through it again. And then I didn't struggle again, and I went on drugs in 2011. So, it really does work, and it becomes about breaking that feedback loop. And again, it was in 2004. There really wasn't much internet. You didn't have it at your fingertips 24/7. And I think that was really a good thing, because I had these two books that I read that taught me how to overcome this anxiety, and I didn't have Google to look at the flip side of it, like, oh, some people never overcome it, and some people do everything that is recommended in the books and it doesn't work. And that would have planted seeds of doubt in my mind, and it would have perpetuated that fear cycle. So I think that's really important in this community as well. You have to unplug. So many people that I talk to have so much knowledge about these drugs that they know more than most doctors. And it's like, you don't need to be on the forums anymore. You know everything that you need to know. You have to unplug. And in this tinnitus book, he talked about how tinnitus can become an addiction. Listening for it, evaluating it, scanning for it. It's like an addiction. And I went through that with my looping thoughts. I had terrible, terrible looping intrusive thoughts for 4.5 years from drug withdrawal. Absolutely relentless. And again, in the acute, subacute phase, it was more chemical in nature. I could not distract from it. It was like telling a drunk person to not be drunk. I just had to survive and get through the acute and subacute. And this is what I tell my clients. But once it had become protracted and I had a little bit of space from it, meaning I was getting small windows, those are the times when you start working on sort of the cognitive behavioral stuff, the acceptance and commitment therapy, the exposure and response prevention, all of those types of therapies to help you overcome OCD, phobias, anxiety disorders, panic, agoraphobia, all of those things. That's when those can become effective. And I really encourage you, again, not in acute and subacute. You can arm yourself with the knowledge, but I'm not saying it's going to be particularly helpful if you're in the throes of acute withdrawal. It might, and it might even just help you prepare for the future if you start getting windows and waves and flares, and then can help you during the flares because you have a little bit of space. But I really think that you can attribute what I'm saying to a lot of these symptoms, and a lot of these symptoms become fueled by the fear response over time, but it becomes more controllable. And so that's where, when you're in a more protracted state, I would argue that the chemical influence is not the primary problem anymore. It might be still a problem, but I think the second fear and all of the messages you're giving yourself and you've given yourself over time can be an even bigger influence on perpetuating the cycle. So I encourage you, look at your diet, look at everything you're exposing yourself to, because there is a trauma aspect to this. I really believe that. And so, kind of staying out of the, not watching things like the news and the scary movies. And of course, when you're in acute and subacute, you're probably not doing that anyway. I'm talking about further down the line. I mean, it doesn't really feed your soul, and it isn't really helpful in any way. And it's important to start focusing on other things and kind of getting yourself back into the, quote, so to speak, real world, and it's important. Again, I've talked about this in videos. Nurture your nervous system as much as possible. I mean, in the beginning, that's all you'll be doing. But then eventually, when you start to get small windows, stretching yourself. Don't push yourself, because a lot of people just want to, clean their entire house top to bottom and wash the walls and run all their errands and everything in a window. And that might be okay, and you might have to rest afterwards, but it might be okay to just, scale back and be like, you know what, I'm just going to stretch myself a little bit, come back, and just like be gentle with yourself and listen to your body. People push themselves too far and then they crash into a wave for 3 weeks after. Really listen to your body. I just made a video about that. It's so important. This process can actually be positive in the sense that you become very self-aware, but in a good way. You learn how to listen to your body, to listen to your intuition, and to really take the best care of yourself you probably ever have. As far as like actual diet goes, I tell people that I think the extreme diets, they work for some people, but the majority of people, they can almost drive themselves crazy trying to find the right diet. I think that as long as you're eating healthy and higher protein, fat, and less simple carbs or no simple carbs and just complex carbs and whole foods, that's good, because as a diabetic of 25 years, I know that the more you have a bouncy blood sugar profile, the more cortisol is released, and that's what you want to avoid. So try to flatline those blood sugars, eat healthy protein, healthy fats, kind of have that be the more bulk of your diet, and then the carbohydrates, stick to complex carbs. You can look that up and see, but you want to avoid like all of the empty carbs, like the white stuff, lots of bread and flour and sugar and pasta and all of those things, like potatoes that just kind of spike your sugar and crash them, especially if they're not paired with fat and protein at a reasonable, decent level. Anyway, that's just my 2 cents. And again, your environment, looking at your environment and what you put on your body. So I think it's important. You don't have to go crazy with this either, but just to try to like lower your toxic load as much as you can. And I know the word toxic gets thrown around a lot, but people do develop chemical sensitivities sometimes, histamine reactions and those types of things. So I mean, whether you're someone who has that severely or mildly or not at all, I think it's important, again, for overall health, to try to just be more mindful of the ingredients you're putting on your skin and what you're cleaning with, because some of them really are quite harmful to the body over time, and it's just something you want to be aware of. I have my own theories about our bodies becoming toxic from these medications, our liver becoming sluggish. I have some anecdotal evidence for that. These are just my own opinions based on the years of experience I have in this space. And so I think the more you can sort of lower that overall toxic load, the better. And I have talked to people who were severe and protracted who, did lowering their toxicity in every way possible, and they recovered. Now, whether or not it was the passage of time or did that help? I think it did. Some people actually target their detox pathways and they recover. So, but everybody's different. I acknowledge that. And I'm just saying it's something to be mindful of. And I just wanted to cover this topic. Again, it's been a rough night for me, but I feel really calm right now and centered. But yeah, things have been difficult around here. And thank you for those who have been reaching out to me about my eczema or eczema. I don't know how you say it. Things appear to be getting better. I've really been working hard. Again, it's another thing that's a double-edged sword because of the trauma of this whole experience with the drugs. I was going into research mode because I've never had any skin problems, because I wanted to fix it. It was driving me crazy. The itching was intense and severe, keeping me up at night. And so I found it, it was hard because it was like, it can get so overwhelming because they'll say, you got to eliminate this, you got to do a liver protocol, you have to, you have to repair your gut, you have to de-stress, you have to eat this kind of diet. And it's just like, it almost re-traumatized me from the drug community. And I'm like, I try to just scale back and listen to my intuition. And I was like, yeah. So anyway, I came up kind of with my own protocol and it seems to be working, knock on wood. I'm still a little bit like nervous that it's going to come back. It's about a 3 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10, and it was like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. So I think that's success. But thank you for all of you who reached out and gave me suggestions and, empathy. I really appreciate the messages, and I hope you all are doing well, and I will see you next time. Bye.